Thank you. Hopefully a little bit better. Yes. Can I request one thing? People are sitting in the back. Why don't you guys come forward? Because now the sessions are divided amongst 3 auditoriums. It will be good to have you closer. I can probably interact better. And that definitely gives me a huge advantage. So while we look at this is a huge industry buzzword, Internet of Things. I just want a raise of hands. How many of you have an engineering background? Okay. The reason I'm asking because when I started looking at Internet of Things, what came to my aid was my engineering background, which was very much closer to what Internet of Things today evolves. And I'm talking close to 30 years back, so that's a huge time span, which my studies have spanned, and I'm still able to derive the value onto that. A few years back, we had a lot of buzz. How can you control and start the heating or the air conditioning at your house? How can you do some other simpler items from remote, whether you want to do it starting some activity, start an oven at house, like that, while you're driving back. That is what was there. More recently, I have heard advertisements for where you can switch on your water geyser using Bluetooth connectivity. Simple items. Bluetooth, incidentally, does not qualify totally for IoT. But that is what was there. Wearables came about, and a lot of people I have seen using wearables to great efficiency. But the thing has changed. I'm going back to where I was last year. I still have the same old car. Some of you might have been in the presentation last year. So I still have the same old car. I'm still driving to office and get a call from the bank where I triggered some request. What ends up happening? They are interested. They make me a good deal. I start filling up the form while driving. Now, this is where multiple activities are happening on the net. This is still not developed. The only challenge, my car is getting older. What ends up happening? I end up with a breakdown. Not a breakdown, but the car starts coughing. I'm worried now whether I will reach office or not. I'm worried now whether I'll be stranded on the road. Thankfully, the chip embedded in my car has already warned the manufacturer that there is a serious problem. My route is already defined as part of my route to the office, and that's coming from Google Maps. All of us use it. What they have done is they have contacted the nearest service center, dispatched a repair vehicle on a convergence path to my vehicle. I managed to make it to the repair vehicle, quick service, I'm back on my way to office. Imagine how many items have been involved in this. My vehicle, me as an individual, my manufacturer, repair vehicle, maps or routes, ability to understand what is the health of an engine. This is one practical perspective of how the Internet of Things is. Why is it Internet of Things? It is multiple objects. It's covering a huge range of objects onto sensing the data, sharing it across, and sharing it across on the net, on various modes of communication. Interesting items, interesting perspectives. But the best part, and this is where I leverage back to where my engineering studies started coming into play. I want to focus on to three different areas. Sensing, control, remotely across the space. What is it that we're using for sensors? What are we using? What is the information we want to gather? Once we gather the information, What is it that we are trying to analyze? Because this is raw information. We need some meaningful information from that. When we start analyzing that data, only then we understand what kind of control has to be exhibited. So there was a sensing of my vehicle's engine health. It was converted to data. The data was also coming from my route, which actually converged onto sending across the signals to the repair vehicle to converge onto my path. And that is where the feedback also starts, because the next round of sensing is there. This is what is, if I can describe as a basic perspective around Internet of Things. Simplified view? Oversimplified? Yes, possibly. How many of you recognize this? Good. A better representation, a more recent version of Google Car. All about, I will use this example only for the rest of the day or the rest of the talk. Rest of the day, if I start talking, I know people will start throwing brick bats at me. But this is the kind of example which is a good example to start exploring what Internet of Things is. When I talked about sensors, a variety of sensors which are in the vehicle. Proximity. Are you going to hit a vehicle? Yes, in trials, Google cars have been involved in multiple accidents. In all the cases, it's another vehicle hitting the Google car. That is the interesting part. So what it means is, these sensors are proficient enough to sense the proximity and to get out of danger in most cases. Not in all cases still. Speed. We have had enough controversies about requiring speed governors on public vehicles, on school vehicles and all. Technology is available. So how do you maintain speed? Cruise control in vehicles is already available. Direction. Have you ever tried holding your phone with Google Maps on and start shifting? Just change your direction. You will see some interesting phenomena happening on the displays there. Sensing is that much stronger. But this is where part of our new challenges will start coming into play. Each of these sensors has different characteristics. One of the reasons why I asked for how many of you are engineers, probably this is where we need to also start understanding some of the aspects. Because working with any sensor, there's a variety of activities which we will have to take as requirements. The entire characteristics of any sensor have to come into play. How's the data coming? Is it continuous feed? Is it discrete feed? Is it a triggered feed that I have to ask for the data? What is the duration after which I can take the next sensing? A large set of activities start coming into play. We are talking engineering out here. Sorry guys, this is where the business analysis and engineering is going to start merging, and this is where the fun starts for the future. Each of the sets of data which comes in, some of them might be interlinked. Direction and speed has got further impacts. It's not that the source is linked, it's not that the two are not independent, but the two combined become a very different activity. What do we need that data for? We need to exert control. So what aspect of that data is going to allow me to exert the required control? What kind of a control is also going to come in? But that's going to come in later. Is the data originating from the vehicle only? What do you think? Not necessarily. Data will not necessarily originate from the vehicle. We will be taking a lot of data from environment. And in this particular case, Google Maps does come in handy. I'm not doing surrogate advertising for Google, but this is our life. When you see some of these areas, the reds and the yellows, how's that getting sensed? That is getting sensed because other people are also using the Google Maps. Not only Google Maps. Interestingly, that data also comes from smartphones. As the signal gets tracked across different zones, across different mobile towers, the location is getting pinpointed. Where is the speed of movement of some of those getting hampered? Somebody who's using Google Map, actually their speed is also getting monitored. And that is where the congestion data is also coming for some of these activities. So the data which is being contributed for sensing is not only coming from my source, it's coming from so many other people contributing that data. Confusing as hell, but let me take a simple pause out here. Let's walk away from Google Car. I want to hear a little bit in terms of where some of the other external data might come from. Examples, some thoughts from you guys. Valid. What kind of data from cameras though? Image sensing linked. Yes, though there's been always a lot of argument about should the black box be ever maintained on the flight or should it be done remotely. But yes, definitely. Other examples? Yes. Weather is very important into some of these areas. I will take the simplest of the examples. Myntra announced some time back, they're going app only. Why? Why do they want app only? They want to know where you are. They want to provide the triggers when it's the right time to provide the trigger and get you to purchase. This is some of the examples which are coming in. The location sensing by itself on your phones is very much there. There are multiple examples in terms of that. There could be data coming from households. There could be data coming from workplaces. Not only the external climatic conditions, but also what people are doing. Social is one of the feeds into that. Let's get to the control side. Earlier this year, I was giving a talk on to the impact my thought process has had from actually looking at science fiction. The interesting part in that talk was the person I was talking about is no longer in this world, but what he wrote nearly 60, 70 years back, some of that is coming true. Part of that is around control. Part of that is around whether you want manual or automated. Part of that is also what in earlier terms is called robotics. Today, it's evolving. Today, we have even gone away from the terminology we used called artificial intelligence and talking about code generators, self-coding machines, analytics, predictive side. That is all some flavors onto automation and control. So, what kind of control is desired? Is it only a trigger? Today, if you use Google Map, it will tell you, incidentally, a faster route is now available for you. It does that. But the option of changing the route is yours. That's a manual control. What is the control equipment characteristics? Now we are again going into the engineering part of it. What is the minimum quantum I need to change? How soon the feedback will come whether I need to change more or correct back? Calibration across how much change has to be done to achieve the desired result. What is the lag times? What will happen that I need to rely on some other sensors so the feedback loop starts coming in? So again, this is going to be some things which is again going to be heavily engineering driven. However, a BA will have to understand some of these aspects. A BA will have to be aware of some of these characteristics because a lot of times our users will give us a one-line requirement. I need to interface to a proximity sensor for making sure I don't hit anyone. From requirements, by the time it gets into actual design, there's a huge amount of data which has to be collected. even to give to the system designers. And that is got to be doing with what the BA awareness has to be about. Proximity sensor, yes, I do want automatic. Speed, maybe, maybe not. But I look at an evolution also. Instead of having the visual speed markers that this is the speed limit, there might be electronic transmissions that this is the speed limit in this zone, and that will govern my speed governors. Overspeeding and not being able to overspeed might be a challenge for people like me. I love to drive fast. Traffic prediction, I will come to that in just a short while. But what is happening? What is happening? Now let me take the jump into the second stage, which is analytics. Analyzing the data, analyzing large amounts of data. If we have not started understanding where the analytics sits in business analysis, let's make sure we start understanding. Without that skill progression, our roles are going to be challenged. Our roles are going to go past us. There will be other people who will be business analysts with a good knowledge of analysis and analytics who will need to come into play. That's one aspect. The second aspect is all about what we call integration. I have termed it as system requirements. It's not technically system requirements. That is one of the set of requirements which I know most BAs hate, including people like me, because we don't understand what is system requirements. Here it's not system requirements. Here it's engineering requirements. But these are requirements which go beyond software-based requirements. We will have to start understanding those. We will have to start understanding the technical aspects of the physical things. Whether it's sensors, whether it's control devices, we will have to do that. The focus will have to be brought on to that. Requirement side done. Working with our software designers will become that much more challenging, because by that time, we would have hopefully mastered some of this terminology, some of this information onto the sensors, onto the controls. But we will have to give them those inputs that much more closely. I'm bringing in testing. A business analyst role is not going to be limited and should never be limited to requirements. The person who interfaces with the end users is probably the best surrogate for the end user when it comes to UAT. But here, the testing is going to be even much more before. When you start talking about systems and integration testing, a lot of what we put down, a lot of the gaps which we might have unfortunately left as part of the requirements will start coming back to haunt us into the system and integration testing. We will have to focus parallelly onto that side of testing also, and not necessarily only onto the functional testing, not necessarily only onto the UAT side of activities. It's going to become much more complex, because now we are dealing with multiple devices. Imagine in today's environment working on a system and trying to design a UAT perspective where the system has some half a dozen modules or even a dozen modules. How many of you come from a banking background? How many of you have worked on SAP? These are multiple modules which are all coming in. Banking, it's discrete systems coming back together, or core banking, which covers a lot of things. SAP is there. Even today, when we start talking about CRM side, CRM is getting further and further expanded. It is complex understanding the interplay between the different modules. Now what we are talking is at least half a dozen to a dozen sensors alone. Forget about the control systems, which might be another half a dozen control systems. You're talking about a level of complexity which is going to go threefold, fourfold on testing. And a BA, I expect the BA to be able to step in there. So while we have been talking, guess what? Google has just informed that the route which they had shown me earlier, which was taking 50 minutes, is now taking 52 minutes. Do I want to shift to the other route, which is a 1 minute faster? Now I was talking about traffic. But I have another thought in that. I would love to have Google Map evolve at the start of my 50-minute drive to be able to tell me by the time you reach your destination, the next 30 minutes, predictive analysis of the traffic means you should take this route. It's not going to be 50 minutes, it's going to take you 55 minutes, starting at this time. Not a static view of what the route should be, but a dynamic view based on predictive analysis. Some of these things will come into play. Some of these things will be emerging as we talk about. IoT has already become a huge buzzword. There are quite a few dangers also as part of that. There was one article yesterday, actually, which is about a vehicle's control being taken over because of the embedded chips in that, remotely by hackers. It was a test environment, but it was feasible. Because you are now connected on the net, your information flow is public, even if it is encrypted. So data security aspects will start coming into play. And some of those also might have an impact onto our environments. So our role, anybody who's heading out into the IoT environments, guys, gear up. There's a lot of exciting journey ahead. There's going to be a huge amount of evolution which will happen, much more than what I was talking last year around the analytics environment. This is going to be even much more onto that, because this also absorbs a lot of analytics outputs which start coming into play. Questions? So this is just a brief view in terms of what IoT can be. It will evolve. This is my perception, but hopefully I'm not too far away from what it will evolve to. Yes, please.
Hi, Sanjay. It's Sundar again from Mashtec here. Now, you've spoken about engineering, understanding of engineering concepts, or then you've spoken about business analysis, testing, security. In today's the way our roles are kind of laid down today you have specializations. People doing only security, people doing only testing, testers and so on and so forth. Only developers. And business analysts focusing only on business analysis, writing down the requirements. Now here you're talking about an amalgamation of all these, roles. So is a business analyst got to understand, deeper aspects of testing, white box, black box, etc., also understand engineering, how the devices are going to work, get into the intricacies, etc., etc. Is that so? Are you saying that the business analyst now needs to widen his scope so much to understand the information worth of multiple roles?
I think I'll go back to an earlier conversation we were having a short while back after the morning session. I started in this industry when we were jack of all trades. We would do the requirements, we would do the design, we would do the development. Testing, thankfully, even at that time was a separate group, but we would go and install at client side, train the client users. We were jack of all trades. Outsourcing, one of the success factors was the ability to drive down the pricing, the ability to start creating specialized roles, and over the last few years, we have also gone into ability to create the super specialized roles. A business analyst who will only interface with the client-side users, not do the functional requirements, but only the business requirements. We went into that. Over the last 2 years, I have seen the demand coming from some of our users for somebody who can interface across all these layers, because these layers became silos by themselves. So yes, there is already a demand which is in the industry to cut across these specialist layers. One of the areas which I start and try looking at for the business analyst is do you understand the entire cycle? Then, do you understand what a BA can play across, roles across that cycle? That is important. Awareness automatically will yield to better career opportunities for us to move and enrich our career. It's not always vertical. A lot of the movements are horizontal. It'll still be the BA role. But there are new flavors of BA roles. I've had a fantastic level of success in making sure a BA is planted in every testing team. There was a huge amount of value which was coming in. So, should the BA know testing? Black box at the bare minimum, functional testing side of activities. Now, this is going to get even more complex. So, there will be some specializations which will start coming into play. But all those are opportunities for us, is what I would say. There will be a huge variety which is going to start impinging upon the business analyst role. Bulk of the business analysts till now were focused onto the services industry. A different ball game has just started.
And if one wants to kind of progress his or her career in IoT related business analysis, what is the path? How do you approach, or whom do you, or is there kind of any leading organizations who?
See, today some of the research side activities are going on in terms of IoT, but more and more use cases I can see coming up in terms of how the various internet activities, various components will be combined over public transmission of data to start collaborating and to start creating control. It will happen. I would say the only thing which today a BA can actively do is get into better and better awareness of some of these areas as they are evolving. Today they are still being explored. About a year down, 18 months down, max 2 years down, we will start seeing some practical projects coming up which are directly exposed to users. Right now the experimental Google car, which I took as an example, is very much there. How many people are working out it? Very small group. But as more and more components come about, it will start expanding.
Thank you.
Hello. My question is, today we are specialized in one or the other domain, even though we are BAs. So going forward, do you see that those barriers breaking down and us getting into multiple domains in order to become effective in IoT?
See, I think we should stop figuring out whether we need to learn a domain. The thing is, we should look at what will help me pick up a domain quickly. So what are those learning techniques which will help me pick up a domain quickly? One of the ways I found it works different for different people. For me, the easier way was if I start understanding the process flows, I can pick up that domain that much more quicker. Different people use different techniques. But we should stop looking at that we are super specialized in one domain. As I said, there are a lot more opportunities horizontally than vertically. There's a lot of enriching. The IoT perspective will come about as a horizontal movement and not a vertical movement. So we should equip ourselves for better and quicker learning. That is what I would say. What is the domain which I have taken out here? It is still based on softwares. We are still in that zone. However, I have to be aware of that many more components.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, this question, this is my fourth BA this question is a perennial question about what is the role of whether it's a domain. I think one of the answers to that is that different companies are at different levels of BA maturity in terms of understanding the BA role, and some companies are ahead than others, and those companies which are more mature will be able to look at a BA from a more broader perspective than some companies who are very focused on certain verticals. What do you think?
I think it's not necessarily limited only to the company's maturity. Who defines the business analysis environment. We are the people who define that business analysis environment. So one of the things which I want to actually look at is people pushing the envelope a little bit more. As a BA, I can do this also. As a BA, I can do that also. Is that a role which is a non-BA role? So what? Let me get aware about it. Because I need it, I need to interface with that individual. So a lot of that is in our hands, is what I would say. We as a community have to start expanding the awareness, expanding the understanding of what a business analyst is capable of, and making our organizations and our delivery teams also that much more aware. There's value.
Hi, I'm Manjunath from Deloitte. My question is around from IoT perspective, which particular industry is aggressively utilizing IoT capabilities, and how each of the sectors in the industry are progressing?
This is a question which I might not be able to do that much justice to. However, I will try. Till around 4-5 years back, some of the earliest areas which were explored, which today have become IoT, was done by Microsoft, that much more aggressively. Today, Google has taken center stage. But is it their core activity? Not necessarily. So these are expansion areas for every business. These are collaborative areas for every business. Which organization is doing today IoT that much more? Today they are still only concepts which are being tried, which are being tested. The utilization into real life, well, one of the things which is going to be a big impediment into the utilization of IoT is what I put down there as one term called automation. This is going to take control out of people's hands. One of the things which I told you I worried about is I can't even overspeed because my speed governor will control that. It's already taken out of my hands in a way, or in the near future. So that's the impediment. But the concepts are being developed slowly. The concepts are being expanded upon. There's a lot of work which is today going on into the agricultural industry in India, which is focused onto actually the usage of water. That's a scarce resource in our country because we are so much that much more dependent on the rains. The other area where some of the IoT activities are going on are in the retail sector also. But is there a dominant player? The only dominant players' names which I can talk about is Microsoft. Second item which is happening is Google, which is that much more public. But there's a lot of small items which are today going on. Somebody wanted to ask a question.
Hi, Sanjay.
Hang on just 1 minute.
Hello? Hello? Yeah. Hi, Sanjay. I'm Teja from Accenture. Thanks for your interesting speech on IoT. My question is, for now, as BAs, we are limited by the sensors that are being currently manufactured and available in the market right now. Will we in the near future be able to drive the kind of sensors that will be used in different domains, maybe like agricultural, as you mentioned, because we might be looking at soil fertilizer content or the amount of moisture that is present, several use cases like that. So we as BAs, will we be able to drive the manufacture or development of new sensors for IoT?
See, as BAs, we will be some people whose opinion might be sought on how a sensor can do better. The core sensor development actually is still in the realm of hardcore engineering. I have seen those sensors evolve over time. But that is hardcore engineering area. A BA might be able to create a demand in terms of, I wish this sensor could do this better. So that starts off a different range of evolution onto that. So the BA role on that side is comparatively limited.
Excuse me. Hi.
Thanks, Sanjay. I mean, it was the topic was very much, highly buzzword in the industry world for the IoT things, and your presentation was very nice. And in that regard, I have one question, like, the IoT things does a lot of things on the automation process. like communicating, sensing the things and mechanism for the controlling the devices and all those things, what is shown in your example. So if automation process is coming into picture and as per the industry analysis and the predictive analysis coming into picture and something on cognitive computing is also coming into picture, in that sense, do you think that BA people will be playing the role of a high skilled peoples or something they need to thought of in that domain?
See, that is one of the specializations which is coming about as part of a BA role, which is analytics. The analytics here for a BA role is not the usage of the tool, but analytics is a role where a BA looks at information. So the information focused BA starts getting into that. So there's already a role which is getting defined, and there's already a role which is in demand today. Not on the usage of tools, but on understanding what is the information and how that information is going to end up impacting the business goal. So there, the link which is established.
But nowadays also coming the data scientist role also. I mean, few things is also there. So how that data scientist and BA role will be merged there? I mean, how they will be playing their role?
I want to ask one. How many people here enjoy statistics? Enjoy. These are potential data scientists. But it's a far cry. It's a long journey to become a data scientist. Data scientist focus is getting that much more into not just onto the statistics sides, but certain new approaches which are coming up in data analysis. That is a key perspective there. A business analyst role, on the other hand, compared to a data scientist, a business analyst role is understanding what the business goals are and what kind of information will provide insight into that particular goal. The link there is very different. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what he has asked. What I intended to ask is how strong will be the relation between the data, the big data and the business analyst as a role? It's almost similar.
Big data is a tool.
Yeah.
Where should we look for that data which we want to use in whether Hadoop as a tool or like that? What kind of data? That is where a business analyst can play a part. That is where the awareness of the business and how the business gets impacted starts playing a part. Not only the realm of business analysis alone, but there are definitely a play in that.
Okay, thank you.
Hello sir, my name is Partho and I'm from Christ University and I'm a student of MBA in Lean Operations. Sir, most of my questions were already answered by the crowd. But I have a question, sir. Since the internet is the backbone of this Internet of Things, rather a very strong and fast internet connection, what would be the major constraints into its implementation in a country like India? Since in the US, Amazon has already come up with the concept of push to order and drone delivery. So what would be the major challenges in here in India? And how long would it take for such a thing to be operational for the general public?
I would not be the right person to answer that question, but I will give you a perfect example for that. If you today go to US, and I will take the two countries which you mentioned. If you today go to US, what is the mobility penetration? Even today in US, every household has a landline, wire-based. They set up that infrastructure. Now to walk away from that infrastructure is difficult. In India, we had a monopoly called Bharat Sanchar Nigam and MTNL, where the number of connections for landline were limited. Going to pre-mobility days, I have seen waits of multiple years before you can get a phone connection. What changed that? Mobiles. Today, if you look at the mobility penetration in India, and the number of handsets which are owned per person, it's much higher. India today is connected because of mobility, not because of the infrastructure. So when you talk about internet connectivity, in certain areas, yes, infrastructure is required. There will be newer technologies which will come in, which will start bypassing the need for physical infrastructure or that much intensive physical infrastructure. So that's the example which I can give. I don't know what the answer will be directly in terms of what will be the time frame or what kind of technology will come in there.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. And definitely welcome any more questions later. Interesting set of evolutions which is happening, which is going to impact all of us. Keep that in mind. Thank you very much.